it's Alex, the Bookubus. Today I'm going to be talking about all of the books I read in September. I ended up reading 14 things, but this was because it was Shorty September, so yeah, most of what I read were shorties. I also read two, kind of longer, more full-length type of novels. So I did, get quite a lot crammed into the month. Shorty September-wise, that was my focus for the month, and this was a readathon hosted by Bert and Sean over at Past Storytime and Heather at Too Many Heathers. Please do go check them out if you haven't already. I will leave their channels linked in the description below. And yeah, the aim of Shorty September is to read short books. So I put together an ambitious but exciting list of books I wanted to get through. Unfortunately, I didn't get to all of them, but I did get to a bunch of them and mostly had a really good time with them. In addition to that, there was Vamptember, which is a vampire-themed readathon for September, which is hosted by Regina at Regina's Haunted Library. Again, I will leave her linked below. Please do go check her out if you aren't already subscribed to her. And yeah, I had forgotten about Vamptember, unfortunately. I'd already gone hog wild for Shorty September, so I didn't have much room to add in vampire books this time around, but Regina was hosting a group read of Salem's Lot by Stephen King, and that's a vampire novel that I've been meaning to read for years and haven't, so I decided to jump on that opportunity and pick that up, which was one of the reasons I maybe didn't get to as many shorties as I could have, but still, I'm glad I read Salem's Lot. So it all worked out okay, and for Vamptember I did end up watching a bunch of vampire films instead of focusing on books. So yeah, I'll talk about Shorty September and then I'll move on to Vamptember at the end of the video. So I will start off with the Shorty September stuff, and I'm going to kick off my mini reviews with my two favourites of the month. I gave both of these 4.5 stars. So yeah, they're going to be on my favourites of the year. And one of them is Hellhound by Ken Greenhall. This originally came out in the 1970s and it is in essence an animal attack book, but that isn't a subgenre that is generally one I gravitate towards. It's one I've definitely read some and enjoyed them, but yeah, it's not like a go-to for me. But I'd heard so many great things about this from so many people that I knew I had to get to it one day. I'm really glad I did because I loved it. So this is the story about a bull terrier called Baxter who dreams of a better life than the one he currently has living with his owner. So yeah, he kind of makes some things happen in order for maybe that owner to no longer be there and someone else has to take him in. And yeah, things go from there. I don't want to say too much more about it, but yeah, this was way more thoughtful and poignant and just had a lot more to it than you might expect from like an animal attack kind of book. It isn't just wall-to-the-wall killings and violence. There's definitely some dark elements to the story, and I did feel for Baxter maybe more than I should have. I'm not sure, but I loved this. I loved his writing style. There were just so many descriptions that I would read something and be like, wow, that's an amazing piece of writing right there. And I would just reread it and be like, man, this guy is good. And this is a pretty short book. So if you have any interest in it at all, if it, sounds like it might be your thing, then I would highly recommend giving it a go. I did then watch the film adaptation of this, which is called Baxter, came out in the 80s, and really enjoyed that too. I ended up giving that 4 stars. I think it was a good adaptation of the book. There were certain things that they had to change, but overall I think it got, the essence. It wasn't quite as good as the book, just because, I think it was better. It usually is. But if you've been curious about the film adaptation, I think it is well worth checking out. And then my joint favourite of the month was Where I End by Sophie White. And this is a new release. I was lucky enough to get a copy of this through NetGalley. I think it has already come out elsewhere maybe in the UK like a year or two ago, but it's only just getting a US release. And this is about a teenage girl who lives on a remote island off Ireland, an Irish island, and she has a very isolated life. She lives with her mother and grandmother. The mother is bedbound and needs around-the-clock care from our main character and the grandmother, and the other islanders steer clear of this family, and our main character finds out some more about her family and the situation as the book goes on. And there is also an outsider who comes to stay on the island. Our main character becomes obsessed with them. Yeah, I don't want to say too much more about this, but this was, yeah, I love the writing style, and it was very disturbing. It does go to some dark places, and heads up for, I'll just say, abuse of vulnerable people. I'll leave it at that. So yeah, some of that was hard to read and some of it was incredibly messed up, but brilliantly written, very engrossing, and yeah, it was just a really interesting read to get in the head of this character who has had a unique upbringing, and yeah, how that has affected them and the way they interact with other people in the world. Yeah, highly recommend this one. I gave it 4.5 stars. Okay, so moving on to my other shorties, I read Moieties by Elatron Frass, and this was kindly sent to me by the author, so thank you to them. Honest opinion, of course, though, this was excellent. It is presented in quite a unique manner, so we have a main story, which in itself is quite strange. Definitely has, yeah, some violence, visceral content, sexual content. It's basically about two twins who are conjoined and are being surgically separated. In addition to this story, we also have notes written by someone or some people, and we also have like annotations, which talks a bit more about the patients and the procedure. So yeah, combined, it makes for a very interesting read, definitely an involving read, and one that you have to, yeah, really kind of be present for and pay attention to and figure out exactly which parts you need to read and how. I don't want to say too much more about it. I think it's well worth finding out for yourself. This one, yeah, has this, yeah, very interesting story about these twins and how they are kind of part of the same person, and how, you know, if they are separated, how would that affect them? And yeah, there's some religious elements here as well. Yeah, it's just a lot of strange content, but definitely my kind of thing. Definitely, you know, I would say horror, or at least horror adjacent in certain aspects. If you liked that immersive experience of House of Leaves, for example, I think you might want to check this one out. Very different in, you know, actual content, but just that, yeah, that unique reading experience is definitely present here. And I'm sure there is a lot I didn't get on my read through. Yeah, this definitely seems like the kind of book that you can piece more of the puzzle together if you were to revisit it. So yeah, as per my first read of it though, I gave this one 4 stars. I thought it was excellent, very unique and interesting. And yeah, a lot of messed up things happen. There are worms. Yeah, I don't know. I don't want to say too much, but if you like the kind of things I like, I think you would like this. Next, I read something completely different, and this was a YA horror book from the 90s. This was The Wish by Diane Ho, part of the Nightmare Hall series, and this was about a group of friends who find this wizard kind of animatronic thing in the back of their local pizza place, and you know, you wish for something and it gives you kind of like a fortune. So a bit like the film Big, where he, yeah, makes a wish and it is granted. But of course, yeah, in this story, it doesn't have good consequences for this group of friends with the things that they wish for. And yeah, I thought this started off really strong, but it just kind of got a bit silly, and some of the things that played out just, I don't know, I just couldn't quite like get on board with some of it. So overall, I gave this 3 stars. I think it was still, you know, it had its moments, it was good, it was okay, but definitely not like a new favourite or anything. But I'm looking forward to reading more of the Nightmare Hall series because, yeah, this one was fun in its way. I gave it 3 stars. Next up, I read a non-fiction book, and this has a really long title. So it is Here's to My Sweet Satan, How the Occult Haunted Music, Movies and Pop Culture, 1966 to 1980 by George Case. Really enjoyed this one. Yeah, this is definitely a topic that I find really interesting, and this is something that I feel like the Satanic Panic gets talked about a lot, but this book kind of talks about I would say mostly pre-Satanic Panic. It does touch on it, on certain things, but yeah, it's not a book about the Satanic Panic, I wouldn't say. Still interesting if you like that topic. I think you would enjoy this. And yeah, I think for the most part, there are separate chapters that delve into the kind of the depiction of Satan and the satanic within music. There's one about movies. There's one about like specifically kind of kids pop culture and, you know, breakfast cereals and that kind of thing. And I think, kind of talking about how this all was so prevalent within popular culture and then exploded with the Satanic Panic. I do think there were certain chapters that veered off a little bit from what I expected the book was going to be about. Like, it goes into things like Bigfoot and the Bermuda Triangle, which, you know, I see the relevancy of talking about just, you know, kind of like offbeat stuff in general, with this general interest of the public kind of becoming interested into things like witchcraft and, you know, paranormal things and UFOs and just, you know, kind of weird stuff in general, I guess, and cryptids and whatnot. So I see the relevancy of including it in the book, but I do think at times it went off on a bit too much of a tangent for too long. But overall, I thought this was interesting and well written, and I gave it 4 stars. Then I dove into some poetry, which isn't something I normally pick up because I'm just never really sure if it's my kind of thing. But I picked up 4 different books of poetry and I thoroughly enjoyed them all. So I'm really glad I finally gave these a go. Some of them have been on my shelf for a while. So first up is The Desert by Charlie Jacob. You might have heard me talk about a couple of her novels that I loved. This Symbiotic Fascination, Haunter and The Season of the Witch are the ones I've read so far, and they were all 5-star reads for me. And yeah, I really enjoy her writing. She does not shy away from extreme horror, and but her writing style is really beautiful and poetic. And yeah, I just really love her style. So yeah, this was a great collection, very interesting, quite an array of different kind of topics and styles. But yeah, all great. There was one about Auschwitz that made me cry. So yeah, powerful stuff. Another one was A History of Touch by Erin Emily Ann Vance. I heard about this one through the author Mike Thorne, who I've mentioned before. I loved his short story collection Peel Back and See and his novel Shelter for the Damned. So yeah, another one to check out if you haven't already. Yeah, this is more focused specifically on women, like real, you know, female figures throughout history. And yeah, it says on the back, it's looking into the female body in folklore, pop culture and history. So yeah, I really enjoyed the kind of overall theme of the book. Yeah, beautiful poetry, very interesting content. Yeah, very much enjoyed this one. I also read, speaking of Regina St. Clair, I read this one by her, Remembering the Dead, a book of poems by R. St. Clair. This one's a very slim one, but yeah, very gothic, very kind of Edgar Allan Poe type of vibes. Yeah, and as per the title, you know, some of that is dealing with loss and grief. Yeah, I very much enjoyed these, excellently written. She is a talented, very talented writer, And yeah, this one has poetry and then also a short story called Father Angelo, which I very much enjoyed as well. That was great. So yeah, highly recommend this. I think this is one of hers that doesn't kind of get talked about as much. But yeah, she's very prolific. And if you haven't read any of her work yet, you should do. And then last up for the poetry is one very kindly sent to me by my friend Briar Moth. This is The Earth Sings in Flowers While I Sing in Tears, collected writing. And yeah, they very kindly sent me an advance copy of this. So this is, yeah, some of it is poetry, some of it is song lyrics from their musical project Vexagon. I have their music as my outro music and have done for quite some time. And then yeah, other selected writings. This is very personal, very intimate. Yeah, some dark subject matter, again, like dealing with grief and loss and love and other things, just yeah, life and how difficult it can be at times. Yeah, this was very raw and powerful, and I feel privileged to have been able to read this. Briar is a friend, but yeah, I wouldn't say this was good if it wasn't. It really is. Yeah, this really impacted me, you know, not only just kind of, yeah, giving an insight into, you know, the mind and the life of someone you know and are friends with, but also, yeah, powerful writing, talented, and yeah, emotional. So yeah, this one was excellent. And yeah, all of these I would highly recommend. Yeah, and this is definitely one to keep an eye out for. Next one is another, going off onto something completely different. This is a manga. This is Shintaro Kago's Pretty Girls collection, Super Dimensional Love Gun. And yeah, this is obviously, yeah, manga. It's kind of like separated into separate stories. Yeah, this is not going to be for everyone, but it's definitely my kind of thing. Yeah, this is very graphic in terms of violence and sexual stuff. So yeah, if that's not something you're gonna want to see, then I would avoid this one. But if you're interested in that, then you might want to check this out. Yes, it's definitely a lot of dark humor here, but also some of it is just super messed up. Yeah, I feel like I can't really say too much more about this. It's either going to sound like something you're interested in or it isn't. But I thought this one was, yeah, super messed up, but brilliant. Okay, just a couple more shorties to talk about. Next up, I picked up Chasing the Dragon by Nicholas Kaufman. Yeah, another pretty slim one. I don't know why I just pointed that out since they're all short books. That's literally the theme. Anyway, Nicholas is a friend, but again, he's a very talented author. I wouldn't say his stuff was good if it wasn't. And this one, yeah, was fantastic. So this is, yeah, I guess like horror plus like urban fantasy. We are following a character, female character, who is a descendant of George, as in George and the Dragon. And this dragon is still a thing, and she is now the one that is having to try and fight it. But she's also a heroin addict. So she is, yeah, the Chasing the Dragon title has a double meaning. I thought this was, yeah, a really unique and interesting concept. Loved his writing style. This is really well paced. Yeah, you're just kind of thrown into it. We've got action, we've got violence, but we've also got emotion. And yeah, we kind of have these flashbacks throughout the story as we learn a bit more about our main character and her life, and yeah, kind of things that have brought her to where she is now. The only thing I could think of to compare it to that you may or may not have heard about is the Miriam Black series by Chuck Wendig. I remember reading the first few of those years ago. I never finished the series, but I remember really loving the ones I did read. So yeah, this kind of like urban fantasy about this, yeah, female character who is, yeah, kind of dealing with some stuff. So yeah, content's very different, but I feel like if you did enjoy that, then you might want to check this out. And even if you haven't read that or ever heard of it, I would highly recommend this. I loved it. Yeah, this was another 4-star read for me and one I would definitely recommend. Okay, and then I finished up the shorties with one more shorty, and this was actually a short story. I think it was around 30 pages, but it's available individually. I bought it on Kindle, I think it was 99¢, but it did look like it was available on Kindle Unlimited if you have that. So this was The Forest Dreams with Teeth by Madison McSweeney, and this is set in the Satanic Panic era, so yeah, that was my kind of tie-in for reading the My Sweet Satan book and yeah, reading this story, and is about this male student who, yeah, is into metal and Dungeons and Dragons and all of that stuff, and becomes the target as a murder suspect when a teenage girl from his school is found murdered. But yeah, as he is trying to figure out what's going on, and because he knows it wasn't him, yeah, he uncovers some, yeah, dark demonic stuff going on in his small town. So yeah, not much more to say about it because it is just a short story, but I really enjoyed this. It was well paced, it had, yeah, a lot of elements that I enjoy, and yeah, I loved the direction that the story took. So yeah, this was another 4-star read for me. Okay, and then moving on to the couple of longer books that I read that weren't part of Shorty September. First up is The House on Cold Hill by Peter James. This was my first time reading this author, and I buddy read this with my friend Jason, so thank you to him for checking this one out with me. Sadly, I didn't enjoy this one a ton. So this is, yeah, your classic haunted house story. We've got a family that move into this house on Cold Hill, and they find out that it might be haunted. And so, yeah, they're trying to settle in, but they're dealing with all these weird things that are going on and getting to the point where, you know, they might actually be in danger. So for the most part, I did actually quite enjoy this. This was kind of gearing up to be like a 3-star read for me. You know, it wasn't anything amazing, but it was good. It was well written, it was well paced, it was compelling enough for me to keep reading it and read the whole thing. And it wasn't really anything new to the genre. It's definitely pretty tropey for, you know, your kind of typical haunted house story and the things that happen, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. You know, it definitely had that kind of cozy vibe when you know what you're getting into and you can just kind of enjoy it. But I think my main problem with it was that the way that this haunting manifests was just in so many different ways, and some of it were just really nonsensical, and I just couldn't kind of like get on board with them. So there were just some things like that that, yeah, didn't quite work for me. And the more it went on, you know, the more kind of like random things that would start happening, and you're just like, how is the ghost even doing that and why? It just didn't make much sense. Also, without spoiling anything specific, there is something that happens later on in the book that then just kind of gets completely glossed over, that is kind of a very big deal in the story, and then it's just like, oh no, apparently that didn't happen. So yeah, it just didn't feel as well written story-wise, plot-wise, you know, as it could have been. Well written in a, you know, very readable type of writing, very easy to get into. Yeah, if you're someone that maybe doesn't read a lot of horror, but you want to read something spooky for the season, this might, you know, this might work better for you. I know Jason, I think he had a little bit of a better time with it than I did overall, but we definitely still had some similar gripes with the book. So yeah, so sadly this ended up being just a 2-star read for me, but it's one I'd been meaning to check out for ages, that had been sitting on my shelf. So at least I got to it and ticked it off. And then last up, I read Salem's Lot by Stephen King. Such a classic that I don't feel I need to say much about it, but yeah, this is basically a vampire makes his home in this small town called Jerusalem's Lot, and yeah, we're following the characters of this town as they deal with that, and as they may or may not get turned into vampires along the way. So yeah, I thought this was great overall. I think a couple of things let it down for me somewhat. I think, yeah, it does meander a bit, but I mean, that is Stephen King for you. I feel like it lost its momentum for me a couple of times, which was a shame, but it did pick back up. And also there are a lot of characters here, so there were times when, you know, a minor character had been mentioned earlier in the book and then they get mentioned again ages later and I'm like, who was that? So yeah, not a huge deal. But yeah, just kind of certain things that I definitely didn't think it was a perfect book. But on the plus side, I did enjoy the story overall, and I thought it had some incredibly effective scenes, yeah, that were just unsettling and full of dread, and yeah, really very creepy and chilling. So yeah, so those are definitely the kind of standout moments for me from this story and what I will remember it for. But yeah, I can definitely see why this is still, you know, kind of regarded as a classic of the vampire genre. And yeah, overall I thought it was excellent, so I gave this one 4 stars. And on the topic of Vamptember, I did want to quickly go through the vampire films I watched. I ended up watching 8 films in total, and yeah, generally had a good time with them. So I had a few that I rated 3 stars. One of them was Abigail from 2024. Yeah, this is the vampire ballerina one. I thought it was okay. It was definitely too long. It wasn't nearly as funny as I thought it could have been, but it was pretty fun. Definitely had its moments. I also watched another recent one, The Last Voyage of the Demeter. Yeah, this one, great concept. You know, I thought that was really interesting. Again, I think it was a bit too long, and yeah, some of it I enjoyed, some of it, yeah, maybe didn't quite work for me, but still glad I checked it out. Another 3-star one was Vamps, which is a kind of cute and fun comedy. So this was like the outlier of my list. One non-horror vampire film on there. It's got Alicia Silverstone and Kristen Ritter as vampires. You know, it was just a fun time, but nothing mind-blowing. Okay, I had a couple of 3.5-star ones. Queen of the Damned. I never saw this when it came out, and yeah, finally getting to it now. This was definitely fun. I did have a good time with this overall, but yeah, it wasn't like a new favourite or anything. But yeah, I would happily watch it again. It was fun. 3.5 stars. Also Thirst. This is, yeah, probably the most unique one on the list. Also, I think the longest. It was like well over 2 hours. And yeah, there were things I loved about it. Like, it looks great, and has, yeah, some really interesting elements. It's about a priest who becomes a vampire. I mean, that's already amazing. But the thing that kind of knocked it down a bit for me was that it is kind of all over the place with its tone and the kind of different directions that the story takes. Some of it I enjoyed and some of it maybe didn't quite work for me. But it was an interesting one. Again, one I'd been meaning to check out for ages, so I'm glad I finally gave it a go. And then the next few are 4-star ones. Byzantium. This is set in the UK on a small coastal town, and we've got Gemma Arterton and Saoirse Ronan, who are, yeah, these 2 vampires who move in. I really enjoyed the style of this one, and I thought the actual kind of vampire lore in this one was quite interesting. So yeah, glad I checked that one out. And then also NOS Veratu the Vampire from the 70s, the Werner Herzog one. And yeah, this was, yeah, it's got the beautiful Isabelle Adjani, and Klaus Kinski makes an incredible vampire. Like, yeah, there were certain scenes where he was just, yeah, absolutely incredible. Yeah, this is a slow one, and maybe a bit too slow for some, but I feel like when things are happening, when the atmosphere is there, it is, yeah, top notch. So 4 stars. And then Dracula from 1974, the one directed by Dan Curtis of Dark Shadows fame and starring Jack Palance as Dracula. So we've generally got the classic Dracula story here, but this one actually has this kind of romance, love interest element, which I believe is where Bram Stoker's Dracula kind of took this idea from, which is really quite interesting. But yeah, I just really enjoyed this one. This is kind of like what I think of as like a classic vampire film. Just kind of, yeah, gives me all of that atmosphere and vampire vibes that I want from a vampire film. So very much enjoyed this one, 4 stars. So that about wraps up my Shorty September and my Vamptember. Thank you again to Bert and Sean from Past Story Time and Heather at Too Many Heathers for hosting Shorty September, and thank you to Regina from Regina's Haunted Library for hosting Vamptember. Yeah, these are definitely readathons I would like to join in with again next year if they are taking place again. I hope so. Next time around I'll try and leave a bit more room in my TBR for some more vampire books and yeah, kind of balance it out a little bit more. But no, I had a really good time with both of these events in September. I read a lot of great books. So yeah, I'll definitely call that a success. Yeah, let me know if you joined in with either of these readathons, if you had any favourites of the month. I would love to hear about them. Thank you ever so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and hopefully I will see you again in my next video. Bye!